Here's every Season 7 Duelist change and what they mean to you. First of all, the Universal Ult nerf that affected all roles. For Duelist, that is damage to energy conversion going down from 90% to 70%, and then a slight nerf to the passive charge rate. W. This is more of a nerf for poke heroes and less for melee. Speaking of melee, Black Panther now has no cooldown on his double jump off of walls. This really isn't a huge change, however, with the entire meta shifting towards dive, he may be nasty. I'm glad they didn't make major changes to him until they see how he performs. Blade got an overhaul, his primary and sword are easier to hit, and he has more survivability from lifesteal in his ultimate and awakened state. His ultimate now does way more anti-2. Overall, some really strong changes. DD had his chain nerfed. Overall, I don't think that's really gonna take him out of being one of the top melee DPS. The bigger nerf was to his mark, but his mark is still pretty strong. I think he's gonna be fine. DPS pool now has a slower ultimate, but he does get more health. This is a good change overall as people are starting to find his niche as a purely melee diver, which means he will also benefit from the upcoming meta. Low-key, he may be busted once people master him. Also, Bloodstone now loses 2 instinct on death instead of 1 and gets less shields on her abilities. Overall, these are pretty solid nerfs and what I've been asking for. The nerf to instinct is a nerf technically to all of her abilities cooldown rate. I'm excited to see how she is and I'm glad they didn't go too far. Hawkeye now has less health, making him way diveable, especially to BP's breakpoint. I think he's gonna be pretty miserable to play next season. Human Torch now has more uptime on his clusters, with more changes coming in 7.5. I don't think this changes much, but I'm interested to see how they proceed with him. Iron Man now gets an extension on his overdrive based off of KOs, and has a slightly faster animation. This is actually a really cool buff as it rewards good target priority inside his beam. However, I don't think it's gonna be enough to bring him into relevance. What he really needs is a refresher to his movement, and maybe a reduction in his hitbox when in the overdrive. I wouldn't mind seeing those buffs and then maybe a nerf to his spam, as that's what most low rank players don't like. Magic's dash hitbox has been doubled. Now it's on par with Elsa. She got this in exchange for a slight nerf to her charge shot, but overall this is a massive buff as that's the hardest part of her kit. It'll be interesting to see how this affects breakpoints though with the charge nerf. With dive meta, she could be pretty good. Psylocke's passive got buffed as well as her shuriken. This is getting her closer to Elsa with uptime on abilities based off her passive. And the shuriken buff isn't huge unless it hits some breakpoints. As a Psylocke main, I'm happy, but one thing I would love to see is give her full headshot damage. If you didn't know, she's one of the only characters in the game that only gets half headshot damage at 150% instead of the 200% that everyone else gets. Scarlet Witch's primary now does more damage up close, and she builds her ult fire faster. These are decent buffs and it's gonna help noobs combat the melee meta, but overall I don't think she's gonna make her way into higher ranks. And finally, we have Winter Soldier losing some primary fire damage on the spell field portion. This likely won't change much unless it hits a breakpoint for a certain character. However, being one of the best PL characters in the game, this may be just enough to push that dive envelope even more.